Hello again, and welcome to another walkthrough here for Intro to Digital Marketing. Today we're going to go through Chapter 14, that is Content Marketing Analytics. And as you can see, I'm already on the screen here. We're going to dive right into it and do this as quickly as possible. I'm also going to have some answers for you for the quiz questions. Gotten some feedback that the content marketing quizzes are a little bit more difficult than the digital marketing essentials quizzes, which could be, I mean, from what I've seen, the scores have certainly been higher on the essentials. So we'll walk through this. Now, of the utmost importance to know, some of the graphics that are in these sections here are not in the slides. So I've attached a couple of them and included them in the page, on the homepage of the Canvas site. They're not all there. Some of the most important ones are, but the whole reason I've pulled up Edify for today is so that I can show those to you so that you understand what you need to know for the final exam. So let's dive right in. I'm going to go section by section. Section 1 is all about KPIs. This is how you come up with KPIs for a digital marketing strategy. This is covered through the lens of content marketing, but in reality, it works for anything digital marketing, to be honest. You've probably heard of SMART goals before, or if you haven't, well, this is your first exposure to it. That is the idea that you want to make goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Now, the definitions of those terms are below. There's a couple questions on the quiz and several on the exam that are about SMART goals. So definitely need to know those. The idea, though, is that you can have multiple KPIs. In fact, you should have multiple KPIs. Any digital marketing brand that only has one is going to be too single-minded and probably not going to succeed, or individuals won't succeed. Say your number one goal of your digital marketing is to generate revenue. If everybody is just focused on that, it's very easy to lose sight of what you're actually trying to do and what's actually going to resonate with your audience. And then you become too obsessed with hitting the mark. So for me, I look at KPIs as being essentially a pyramid, with the very top being your grand goal, but then you have at least 4 to 5 below that. So you definitely need several KPIs to measure your digital marketing performance. Now, in terms of the SMART goals, something like specific goals. I mean, that just means that it's very pointed in terms of what you're going for. Measurable means like being able to actually set up your Google Ads, Google Analytics, or anything like that. Like what you're doing for your final project. Absolutely imperative that it's measurable, because that you can actually look at web analytics. Attainable means that they're within reach, so that if you're looking for a 100% increase in, traffic or revenue through your online marketing efforts, those could be unattainable, and then you end up really losing interest from those who are doing it, or people might think that they're just not attainable. So that's a big part. Something that's relevant would mean that the goals actually match the strategy. So, for example, if your brand strategy is rooted in brand awareness, but your KPIs are focused on revenue, your content marketing is going to be misaligned, straight up. And really, to avoid that, you need to make sure that they are relevant. Now, again, there's this definition here of timely, of course, means that you're actually setting some timelines on these, going by month, by year. You just need to know what the start and the end date are. If we jump all the way down to this first graphic, this is looking at how different types of analytics works. There's the idea that all web editors have some sort of analytics, and they're usually native. That's how I would refer to them. They're usually pretty limited, and so you can see how that works here in the first column. The second column is Google Analytics. That's something that all of you are probably familiar with by now. just kind of differentiating those two. And then the third column, which is funny because Reeby just got acquired. What was it by LinkedIn or by somebody else? Reeby gets bought out, of course, 6 months after I published this book. And it's interesting though, because these larger analytics packages, they're going to set up your whole customer journey, and they're going to make things that you would have to set up dashboards for in Google, for example, a little bit easier, a little bit more time consuming, or a little bit less time consuming. And it's really optimized for marketing. It's optimized for you to be able to see, okay, I can see the conversions, I can see the revenue from my various actions, but it's pricey. Straight up, that's the disadvantage, is it can get really expensive. So that's really all you need to know about here. Honestly, of the couple of graphs that I'm going to show you here, of the tables I'm going to show you, this is probably the least important. There is a question about this on the quiz, but it's only one. So out of 15, remember. Now, if you go down to analytics for social media reporting, this is really just comparing what comes with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of those, and your social media aggregators. Some of you are going to be using these aggregators like Hootsuite or Sprout for your final projects, but most of you are not. From what I've seen, most of the companies are going to use native analytics, which is perfectly fine. I've become I used to be all about the aggregators, thinking, yes, they definitely should be what you use. You should never post natively. But recently I have come to change my tune on that. And it really depends on what you are trying to do. I will warn you that the analytics you see out of natively out of social media accounts are going to be different than what you see that comes out of an aggregator. Specifically, like Hootsuite is going to tell you a different number than what, say, Facebook is going to tell you. They won't be far off. It's not like it's going to be Hootsuite will tell you had 10 clicks and Facebook's at 100, but they are going to be a little bit different. That's something that really the takeaway there is just to know that you just need to stick with one or the other. If you have a Hootsuite account and you have all of your social networks connected to it, and you go to do analysis, I don't know, every month, every 3 months, every year, just make sure that you're pulling all of the data from either all native or all from Hootsuite, not mixing and matching. That is where you're going to have issues. SEO is another place where you really need where there's a lot of room for improvement. I mean, there's not a lot of SEO data that comes from Google Analytics and from websites. For me, if you're looking for greater SEO depth rather than utilizing a ton of stuff you can use the Google Search Console, but SEO programs are really good for looking at the whole web in the competitive landscape. It's going to give you greater insight into your content and domain performance in the larger context of the web and not just by itself. And that's really the problem with Google Search Console is you're kind of limited. It'll tell you what your keyword rankings are. It'll tell you the traffic you get, but it doesn't tell you what else is out there and who you're competing against. So again, Search Console is good for beginners, but if you're actually going to be doing any sort of SEO work that goes below the surface, that's where you need to invest in other accounts. Something like SEMrush that I quickly walked through before, that has a free account, but you only get 10 searches per day. Another program called Hrefs, which is actually spelled, if you were to look at it in writing, it would be pronounced Ahrefs. But that has a little bit more available in the free account, and also because, not that this really pertains to any of you, but Ahrefs also sends out really good weekly update emails to see how your domain has changed, whether that be good or bad over the past week, month, year, whatever you set the alerts to. And so I do that on my own website. It's really good to see if you have any new placements on the web, like, oh, wow, I just saw I was quoted in an article on Databox, for example. That happened to me a couple months ago. I had no idea until Ahrefs sent me a link saying, hey, there was a link back to the Digital Troy website that showed from this Databox website. That's all I guess there's this Content Marketing Institute graphic. This one is actually pretty important. It's not one that I created. It's one that I pulled from the Institute, but it's really important. And it pretty much aligns with what I've been trying to push. And that is the type of metrics that go with different goals. There aren't just two goals. I said at the onset of the semester that brand awareness and sales are the two most common, but you can get more granular than that. You can get into engagement, lead generation, which turns into sales, loyalty and upselling. Those are all options, and they all have different common metrics. You don't have to memorize all of these. Absolutely, you don't have to. But you want to think about just in general where metrics can fall in terms of goals. For example, like if you look at like engagement, for example, these are all pretty obvious. Like blog comments, like shares, tweaks, how many times your emails forwarded, and how many inbound links you have. That all shows people's engagement with a brand. Again, you don't have to memorize these. I'm not going to say like, hey, what kind of metrics should go with brand awareness? I'm not going to ask that. But I will ask larger questions, such as, hey, if your company is looking for, if their larger goal is lead generation, and they ask you to measure new sales, like that doesn't technically match. That's kind of a gray area. We'll say this instead. If your goal is lead generation, right? But then your company wants you to measure your actual video views, like those don't match. Video views do not equal lead generation. Something like a form completion, downloads, anything where you can get data on a potential customer, that is lead generation. Not this other stuff that just shows that content is resonating with people. Those are fundamentally different. Now, if we go to section 2, this is how to create analytics reports. There are a couple of questions about these on the quiz. I do expect you to follow some of these best practices for your final project, but again, you're just presenting a final presentation. It's not like you're creating a full report. This is really going to be useful for those of you who end up actually working in any sort of digital marketing. For me, I mentioned this before, my ability to move up in the world of digital marketing was first and foremost thanks to my ability to think analytically and report analytically. And so being able to look at these different reports and being able to understand how they work is really critical. Again, for the quiz, there's only a couple of questions. For the exam, there will be several questions on this specific section. So please think these through and understand this section in particular. Now, when I look at this, first thing you see here is how KPIs turn into supporting metrics. I'm not going to ask you anything about this specifically, but the idea here is to look at a flow chart and being able to think about, okay, why does something happen? So say, for example, first quarter of, say quarter over quarter, your number of email subscribers decreased. It declined. Your new email subscribers, you acquired 500 last quarter, and this quarter you only got 250, right? Why could that be? It's really important for you to think outside the box and think about, okay, what could have caused this? Obviously, if there's fewer subscribers, that means that there's fewer eyes on the site. I think that's a pretty good assumption. Maybe they don't like your content as much. Maybe you're not maybe you're not writing as much good content on the website and on social media. So you want to look at and see what those supporting metrics are and seeing if those metrics also fall. You want to think about correlations. What are numbers that are moving in tandem? Because you can't just, if you have a decline of email subscribers, if you lose 50% of them quarter over quarter, there's going to be something else that goes with it. You can't just magically improve email subscribers. You need to actually think about, okay, what are the numbers that lead to better email subscriber improvements? That's what this flow chart is for. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on this part, just because if there's one section of this section that I'm not going to dig into, it's this. Email subscribers and ebook downloads also are used in the second section. This one is going to be important for you to know, and that is understanding how KPIs turn into revenue. If there's one way to be able to show your efforts. It's going to be showing how digital marketing efforts turn into money. I encourage you to really try to understand this chart well. And that is the idea that, hey, I get 58 email subscribers. That's great. But I have no idea how that turns into leads or into customers or into revenue. I don't have that data, right? But say on the other side, you get 35 ebook downloads and you do know how many leads you get. Oh, okay, out of those 35, 15 of them check the box that said, I'd like to learn more about their products. And then you go to the sales team says, hey, yeah, out of those 15, 10 of them turn into customers. And say you had an average order value of $10,000, as we learned about in the earlier chapters in the Digital Marketing Essentials book. You then just can extrapolate and say, hey, I got 10 customers out of this ebook. That turned into $100,000 in business. That is a huge, huge boost if you can say something like that. Now, that's not the most common thing in the world, but if you're able to actually think in terms of dollars and cents and how your efforts turn into actual business, you're going to be able to really see how value is provided either by you in your position or in the work that you're doing on a regular basis. That's really, really important to know just for your career prospects, to be perfectly honest. And this is going to be important. Again, you don't need to know all the mechanics to it. It's just that the more data you have and can get that will help you turn your analytics into dollars, the better off you're going to be. Again, it's not, honestly, this is more of a like what you have available to you issue rather than, hey, like everybody has this data, because they don't. And for me, when I was starting out in my career, I had a lot of trouble being able to track down data like leads, and leads turned into customers. I only knew the KPI and the number. I never really understood how that turned into an actual revenue generating opportunity. Now, I did want to call into play these last couple sentences, right? Revenue generation is not a common practice for content marketers or a lot of marketers in general. If you go and work for a startup, yes, you're going to be tasked with turning marketing efforts into dollars because they work very lean, and startups work in a model. They have a business model that's fundamentally different than most established companies. I've had clients who have been startups, and I was met like they would bring me on as a consultant for a few months, and they said, "Hey, look, like we can pay you for 6 months, but after that, like if we don't see any real revenue coming from these efforts, we can't keep you on." And I said, "Hey, I understand." And after 6 months, for one of them, I was able to provide great value and keep the engagement going. Another, I could not. And sometimes it's not your fault. You know, sometimes the company's not in a position to provide you with what you need to succeed. And sometimes the other happens. Sometimes they're really collaborative and they can help you get things done and turn into a great partner. And if I had to look at content marketing specifically, I would say 90% of the time, content marketing is brand awareness driven. You think about the engagement rates, web traffic, and subscribers. That's content marketing in a nutshell. If content marketing is expected to turn into revenue, that's for that lingering 10%, the SaaS companies, the companies that are strictly e-commerce driven and need to see immediate efforts from content. And that's hard to do. Like a content marketer can't show up at a business on day one and turn revenue by day 5. It's kind of like SEO. I look at SEO and content marketing as being similar. They're on similar paths in terms of being able to generate revenue. It probably takes 4 to 6 months before you see actual profit coming out of those types of hires, out of those strategies, and out of those consultants. If I look back on my own role as a consultant, I look at my own company, you know, I've had individual LinkedIn posts that me as an individual have put up that has turned into a ton of revenue. And I don't look at it that way because I look at these as everyday activities, but I do know, I say, hey, I'm going to put a post up on LinkedIn today, and I know that this has a better chance of turning into new business than, say, putting out a tweet on the business account. They're just, they go hand in hand in terms of the marketing, the marketers or the company understanding what kind of actions can work and what generally does not work. Final point, number 3, turning analytics into recommendations. This is a really large, kind of a long table. You don't need to memorize them all, but you're going to have to know some of them. So one idea is thinking about, let's say, let's see here. Where do I want to start? Where do I want to start? I would say of this data, the really important ones to know are going to be really the website ones, because you've already learned these and they're pretty important. And social media. Those are going to be, you don't really need to know the keyword one, the SEO ones. And in terms of the actual quiz, there really aren't any quiz questions about this table, but there will be on the exam. If you want to look at these, I can't tell you which metrics right now are going to be on the exam, but I can tell you that there's going to be a couple from the website, because again, a lot of this comes from the Essentials book earlier in the semester. Now, the other thing here, again, this is a short section if you look at it, and honestly, this chapter is pretty short in general. There's only 5 paragraphs in there, this entire section 3. Now, the one thing, a couple of things here to know. One, if you are going to be looking at this data and say you want to write a report on revenue generation, right? You're better off talking about ebook downloads than something like web visitors or social media click-through rate. You want to think about the difference between what can be construed into revenue generation and what's more vanity. Vanity metrics, I don't believe is in this section. Where is that? I believe vanity metrics are back here. Right. Right. So thinking about something like what metrics are actually going to turn into real recommendations. I don't think vanity metrics is actually defined here. I think it's on a different chapter. But the takeaways here are thinking about reports. You want to come up with a group of metrics that are going to that can work together in a group that you can then put into whatever the goal of the report is. So if you have if you're going to have a report that you put together and you're trying to show brand awareness, great. The goals for brand awareness need to be numbers that are at least bringing people to the website, that show that people are working, people have seen the brand. On the other hand, if you're trying to build a report that's based on revenue generation, you need to show that there is a way that people could be connected for new business. And that is usually anytime that they have to share their data, share their email, which would be through filling out a lead gen form, downloading something that requires them to share their email address. And finally, you just want to make sure that reporting is not just numbers, but also provides recommendations. That's where section 3 comes in. And this is kind of I don't think this is actually a question on the quiz, but the worst reports are the reports that just tell you what happened. Anybody can go and see what happened, but managers, directors, executives, they look for reports because they want to see recommendations. They want to see what needs to change. They don't want it to just be left up to them. They want to see some actual forward thinking and some data-driven recommendations from the team. That's what this chapter is looking to get out. And that's really the moral of the story here today. So that is chapter 14. This is a very quick and fast-paced look at it, but it's the only chapter for the week. And I've been able to sprinkle in most of the answers to the quiz questions in here. So if you have any questions, as always, feel free to email me. And if not, best of luck on the quiz this week, and I will see you next week.